a month in which our souls are liberated and emancipated from hell, and make it a month in which we're accepted and guided and recorded among your accepted servants, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ameen, ameen, wa akhir da'wan, alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd, Jazakumullah khair for attending today's session of the Friday Forum, and it's all about the nafs. The topic for tonight is controlling your nafs and taming your desires. And this is a critical subject. It's at the center of what Iman's supposed to help me do, and it's at the center of my struggle in life in various capacities, between misconceptions, and desires, between my wants and my commitments and my willingness to sacrifice and willingness to grow. So inshallah we're going to discuss a number of different subjects, but before we get into that, I'm going to pass it off to Akhi Ibrahim to share a few of the announcements, and then we'll start the discussion inshallah.
Barakallah feek, Shaykhna, and Barakallah feekum for coming. A few announcements, but before that, just general housekeeping. Thank you all for coming. As always, we have the snacks, tea, coffee on the sides, but please keep the chatter to a minimum, and if you're going to have any side conversations, have them in the side rooms or outside the main musalla. Also, as always, we have the QR code for Slido. You can, you snap onto the QR code, get onto the questions, the forums. You can upload your questions anonymously. If you don't have a question relevant to the topic, but you see a question you like, you can always like it, thumbs up, and it'll go up to the top. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. This is a really good discussion, and we want to keep it very dynamic. So if you have any questions relevant, please feel free. You can do it from now. You could do it as the Shaykh starts discussing something pops up, you can throw it over there, or if you see a question you can like. So we really want the Friday Forum to be dynamic. We want it to be more than just the Shaykh discussing and it feeling like a lecture. We want it to be very engaging, inshallah. Now, as for some announcements, we have tomorrow an Islamic home financing seminar here at ICPC-Clifton after Isha at 7:30 p.m. given by Guidance. And also we have two ongoing classes that we have that have recently started up. We have Ulum al-Quran with Shaykh Osamah on Sundays at 6 p.m. Inshallah, this Sunday it'll be upstairs, but typically it's downstairs in a class format. And that'll be going on every week until Ramadan, inshallah. And then we also have the Basics of Islam course for newly practicing Muslims as well as converts and reverts. That is happening on Saturdays at 6 p.m. also here. That will typically be in the side room or maybe over here if it gets a bigger quantity, but that's also a classroom setting. It'll be given by Ammu Fikri and Shaykh Osamah. That's what I have in terms of announcements, so we can get right into it. Shaykhna, do you want to start by discussing what are the types of nafs, what is the nafs, what are our desires, how do we begin to think about this?
Well, I guess before getting into that, I want to discuss today's date. You guys all know what month we're in, right? You guys know what month? We just finished the first Friday in the month of Rajab. That means Ramadan is less than 2 months away. So we're in the Ramadan build-up now. This is typically when the scholars would say the fruits of Ramadan are planted in the ground. If you're going to benefit this Ramadan, then that's because you're doing something and you're doing it right now. The way they would express that is, they would say that the month of Rajab is the month of Zara'. It's the month where you plant the seed, right? Because again, you know what, this whole spiritual journey is about investments being made. You're not going to become spiritual in a day. All of your problems are not going to evaporate just because you pray 2 rak'ahs, even though we'd wish that, that would be amazing. But in actuality, it needs an investment and it needs a struggle. So they say that the month of Rajab is the month you plant the seed. Then the month of Sha'ban is the month where you actually water those seeds. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ actually would fast the most in Sha'ban, more than any other month aside from Ramadan. And it's not just about fasting, by the way. Any other types of ibadat as well. Just preparing yourself spiritually, reading more Quran, doing more dhikr. Hey, if I'm doing certain sins, getting ready to abandon those sins, trying to make those efforts to enter Ramadan, at full force. And if I have certain negative habits that are really bringing me down, let me figure what they are and let me figure out how I could get rid of them. So, and then Ramadan would be the month in which it all ends, right? It doesn't begin. It ends in Ramadan, the harvest. So it's the month of planting the seed, Rajab, then watering the seed, Sha'ban, then the day of harvest or the month of harvest is Ramadan. So that's how they viewed it in the past. And that's why we would make this dua. Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan. That's why, this subject actually, we didn't really plan for it like that, but it just happened to be suitable for the moment. Talking about the nafs, something that's core to my being. As I'm hoping for change, Ramadan is all about change. There's no better place to start than the nafs. Because you know what? Allah tells us it starts with the nafs. It starts with the nafs. There's 2 ayahs in the Quran. Let's see, I don't know if anyone here would know them. One of them, tells us that change starts within, and Allah causes that change for a people from within. The ayah is in Surah Al-Ra'd. It starts off with, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا. Everyone should know this. Does anyone know this? Raise your hand if you know the ayah. Okay. Hajj, jazakallah khair. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. This is a positive outlook to the idea of change. You're not going to be able to experience change. Allah will not cause change from within you until you change what's within you. That's what that is saying. A lot of yous there, right? So the other ayah actually gives us the danger in it. The other ayah is in Surah Al-Anfal. Surah Al-Anfal. Does anyone know this ayah? ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَمْ يَكُ مُغَيِّرًا. I'm hearing someone recite it. مُغَيِّرًا نِعْمَةً أَنْعَمَهَا عَلَى قَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Jazakallah khair. That's because Allah is not going to change a blessing that He bestowed on a people until they change within what's within them, what's in their nafs. So that's a negative outlook on it. You got a blessing, you want to keep it, guard your nafs. You want to experience change and you want to dig yourself out of a big hole, change your nafs. It starts within here, right? It starts within here. If you unlock the power within, that's what Allah is telling every one of us. If you unlock the power within, there's nothing that can stand in your way. And that's why this subject's so critical. If you unlock the power within, then there's nothing that could really stand in your way. Yani, what more empowering of a message can we find something than that? Allah's putting it in our court. Hey, you want to change your life? You absolutely can. Just beat your nafs. So what is the nafs? That's a good framing. What is the nafs? So you guys know the nafs, it's been translated a bunch of different ways. But is the nafs something negative or positive? If you think it's something negative, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you think the nafs is something negative. Raise your hand if you think it's negative. Okay, raise your hand if you think it's positive. Okay, raise your hand if you're too nervous to raise your hand. Most people don't want to raise their hand, they don't want to guess, right? In actuality, it's used in both ways. So this is something we learned from Imam Ghazali. He actually teaches, and I think that's in his book called Al-Arba'in fi Usul al-Din. He mentions that there are 2 usages of the term nafs. One that makes it synonymous with ruh, soul. Nafs could be good or bad. Nafs and ruh describe what? The soul of the human being. But most of the time when you find it mentioned in books of Islamic spirituality, you find it mentioned in a negative way. You have to struggle against your nafs. Why? Because they're using it in the second usage, which means what? The debased aspect. Those lowly characteristics that are within human beings, the desires that possess people, right? That like the Prophet ﷺ describing, "Ta'isa abdud dinar." All right, the one who's the slave of the dollar will truly be someone who's a failure, a slave of desire, right? So that's why they use it in a negative sense. But in actuality, the Quran uses it in both, right? Right? يَا أَيَّتُهَا النَّفْسَ الْمُطْمَئِنَّةِ ارْجِعِي إِلَىٰ رَبِّكِ رَاضِيَةً. O tranquil soul, go back to Allah, pleased and you will be pleased. Pleasing and you will be pleased, right? So, and then there's other usages of it. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. The nafs, there's certain types of nafs that are inclined like a magnet towards wrongdoing. Like it's just so hard to avoid it, right? And sometimes you might experience this with yourself, you know, these overpowering thoughts that just it seems like these thoughts, for some people, have so much power and control over you that you have to fight so hard against them not to fall into what your nafs is telling you to do. Right? That nafs al-ammara bis-su'. There's a lot to talk about in that regard. Right? What causes that? What causes it to become so difficult to avoid sin? And then there's nafs al-lawwama, which is the one that's always in between. I do it and then I regret it. And then I'm trying to fight it, but then I lose and then I win another time. And there's this constant back and forth. It's a little bit about the term nafs. Understanding your nafs and taming your desires. This is what we're going to discuss for tonight, inshallah. And I'm hoping to make it dynamic and as interactive as possible. Please send us your questions and your comments here, and hopefully we'll make that the basis for our discussion. We have anything coming in or not yet?
I have 0 questions.
Allahu Akbar.
Let's get them to 10.
واضح. Everything's understood. All right. Why is it really important to, why is the subject of desires so important? Allah designed us in a particular way. All of us. We're designed, with certain characteristics. Allah put within us anger. Anger is not bad. It can be bad. Allah put within us sadness. Sadness isn't bad. It can be bad. Allah put within us happiness, and that could be good and it could be bad as well. Right? He put within us a set of emotions. And then with those emotions, He put within us wants, desires. Right? And then He put within us a mind to be able to decipher things. What's good for me, what's bad for me. There is a certain relationship that all of this has with each other. It's not random. If I'm able to understand how I operate within on a spiritual level, I'll probably be able to figure out a lot of things that I'm that I'm dealing with on the outside. The mind plays a critical role. The soul plays a critical role. The way we see things is not the same, brothers and sisters. Not every 2 people see the same thing the same exact way it is. No. And why is that? Is because how do I see things? Do I see things with my eyes, or do I see them with my soul? In Arabic, the word for eyes there's multiple words, but one of them is, what's the word for eye in Arabic? Ayn. Another one is basar. Ayn, basar. This is for the eyes in your head. There's another set of eyes in your soul, right? What do we call that? Basira. Basira. That's the spiritual eyes. And if someone is blind within their soul, it's even worse than being blind within your head. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ وَلَكِنْ تَعْمَى الْقُلُوبَ الَّتِي فِي الصُّدُورِ. So we don't see the same exact thing the same way. No. Our perception of things is altered by our spiritual states, for better or for worse. So you might see something that is negative that's seen as positive. And you might see something that's positive that's seen as negative. It's a strange dynamic, wallahi. It's a strange dynamic. The Prophet ﷺ tells us this in the hadith, that for some people, ma'ruf, something that is absolutely pristine, good, pleasant, no one should object to it. Some people, because of spiritual blindness, see that good thing as something that's ugly. I don't want that. That's nonsense. I'm not going to waste my time with it. And some people, the opposite. They see something that's absolutely deplorable and absolutely destructive to themselves as something so desirable. They might waste years of their life chasing after it. I wish I had this in my life. And when they actually get it, they realize that they shouldn't have ever wanted it for themselves, ever, ever, ever. That's what the blindness of the souls does to us, brothers and sisters. So the subject of desires is actually a really critical one. And the beautiful thing about it, and if you look at the pillars of Islam, you will find that each one of them there's a reason why they're a pillar of Islam. And it's not just like أي كلام يعني. Each one of them covers a certain base needed in my life. Salah, my direct relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal. I need that. That's my personal relationship with my Maker. Fasting Ramadan as it's coming, that's exactly what liberates the nafs. It liberates it. It gives me, it's my relationship with my soul. Ramadan is the month of soul maintenance. The month of soul maintenance. Right? That's why, there's just so many things that change within Ramadan. It's strange that someone would be given the month of Ramadan and not experience tangible changes in their life. Really. The whole month is made in a way that puts us in control and puts us in power. So that's a little bit about the dynamic of the nafs and where we're at right now as we're getting ready for Ramadan. The rest of the pillars also deal with that. So the salah, me and Allah. Fasting, me and my nafs. Zakah, me and those in need. Right? Hajj, universal body of believers. Each one of them has its own dynamic and sphere that I need in my life to grow as a person. Allahu Alam.
Barakallahu feek. Thank you all for participating. Now we have plenty of questions. First of all, just a note, please keep the questions relevant to today's discussion. I do have one question that reminds me of a thing I forgot to mention, which is huge. Next week we'll be bringing back the meeting point, which is a podcast format with Shaykh Osamah, Shaykh Yasir Fahmi, and Zaid Abbasi, Ustad Zaid. It's an amazing podcast that you can find online. You can look through the old episodes. It's a podcast. It's also on YouTube. And next week we'll be discussing the long-awaited discussion of part 2 of young marriages and marriage in general. The specific topic about that will be, what is it? We don't know yet, right? We'll know in a couple of days.
Something about marriage.
Something about marriage. So all those questions will be answered next week, inshallah, in that panel. So that's to answer that question. Now, there were a couple of questions that came up. One, I guess, background one. How would you describe the nafs linguistically? What does that mean exactly?
What does nafs mean linguistically?
Yes.
So, look, the nafs is something that was breathed into the creation of Adam. فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Linguistically, nafs coming from nafas, coming from Allah Azza wa Jal creating Adam alayhi salam with a unique element of soul that is directly from Allah Azza wa Jal. So, nafs is actually the central to what makes me unique as a human being. Without it, I'm just a body. I'm just a body, and as a body, people will quickly get rid of me. And that's why the nafs involves everything that's going on the inside. Everything that matters. Everything that makes you vibrant with life relates to your nafs. Your ruh, the soul that's within you, your emotions, your wants, your process, your conscience, your process of thinking, all of that relates to the nafs. So the inner workings of the soul can all be traced back to that terminology. Wallahu alam.
Barakallahu feek. Another good question, and I'm asking because it clarifies more about the nafs. Is the nafs the same thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed from the Prophet ﷺ when he was young?
No. Like we said, there's usages for the term. That's not what it's meant. So what was removed from the Prophet ﷺ? The element of sin. Sin is not The nafs is not sin, okay? Nafs is used synonymously with ruh in many occasions, and it's also used to describe the debased aspects of humanity. But doesn't that mean sin? Are we created with sin? No, we're created upon fitrah. We don't believe that we're created with sin. But we have the susceptibility to sin, right? So when the Prophet ﷺ, experienced that unique thing where something was removed from within him in the seerah, he was still a child. If we say that that's sin, we're going to say children are sinful. Children are not sinful, they're pure. But human beings have the susceptibility to sin, meaning certain behaviors and patterns could be learned. There are certain things within me, anger, if it exceeds its bounds, it'll lead to something that's so toxic. Sadness, if it exceeds its bounds, it'll lead to something so toxic, right? Love, if it exceeds its bounds, it'll lead to something very toxic. These are emotions, they're not bad. But what was removed from the Prophet ﷺ was the susceptibility to sin. All of us, the rest of us, we have that. And what I mean by susceptibility is that these patterns could be built, and I could start becoming inclined to certain things that may be destructive to me. Wallahu alam. That's how. There's actually a beautiful line of poetry taken from the Burda of Imam al-Busayri that tells us a little bit about the nafs. Since you asked this question, it says, وَالنَّفْسُ كَالطِّفْلِ إِن تُهْمِلْهُ شَبَّ عَلَى حُبِّ الرَّضَاعِ وَإِن تَفْطِمْهُ يَنْفَطِمِ. The nafs is really what you put into it and what you build within it. This line of poetry says the nafs is like a young child. A young child. If the young child is raised in a way in which they become so attached to their mom or to breastfeeding, that's what he's talking about here, right? In tuhmilhu, if you don't try to wean the child, what's going to happen? The child's going to continue wanting to suckle from his or her mother, right? Until way past the time that's allotted for that, way past the 2 years, right? So وَإِن تَفْطِمْهُ يَنْفَطِمِ. But if you try to wean your nafs, then just as a child will be weaned, your nafs will be weaned too. It's all about patterns of behavior. That's why Ramadan is 1 month. That's why salawat are 5 salawat. That's why there are certain things that are embedded within my Islam to try to change patterns of behavior. Wallahu alam. That's really what the larger part of this subject's about. Taming desires. I need to develop positive patterns of behavior. It's not about one-offs. It's not about praying to Allah, oh Allah, change everything bad about me. Oh Allah, make my life a whole lot better. Yeah, make that dua, but also focus on the patterns that lead to the nafs becoming the way it becomes.
Barakallah feek. So it sounds more like it's not about just putting...
You know what? It's like a magnet. It's like a magnet, right? You know that hadith, we learned this hadith, I remember, from the halaqah days long ago, from the 40 Nawawi hadiths, right? You guys know the hadith about the Ra'i yar'a hawla al-hima, the shepherd who grazes too close to the red zone, the area that's belonging to the king. You guys know this hadith? How many of you don't know this hadith? You don't know this hadith? A bunch of you don't know the hadith. I need to know this hadith. Come on. We have to know this hadith. This hadith tells us, hey, you know what? There are things that are clear as day in terms of halal and clear as day in terms of haram. And in between them, there's a whole lot of gray. You know what happens with taming the nafs and taming the... If, I don't know why, but I just can't stop doing this haram thing. I know it's really bad and I know it's destroying me. Well, you know what? Maybe I'm too close to it. Maybe I put myself in such a precarious situation, such a difficult situation that I find myself falling into this, right? Right? I'm attached to a guy or to a girl, whichever way you want to put it. And then you dig a little deeper. Why? Okay, we're messaging each other 100 messages a day. Maybe that's the problem. Reduce them a little bit, less than 100 messages a day, and maybe you'll find the attachment will evaporate. Right? If you're always in close proximity of something that's illicit, how are you going to be able to avoid it? How are you going to be able to avoid it? How are you going to be able to tame your desires if you expose yourself to the fire? Right? That's what it's about. So he says that if you get too close within the red zone, then what? You're going to fall within it. And that's why we have this breakdown, right? وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ لَا يَعْلَمُهُنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ. That's how I tame my desires. You know what? Let me get near it. Let me not get near it. لَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. The Quran says, don't come near zina. Don't come near fornication. If I put myself in many situations that are very questionable, where I'm alone, isolated, doing certain things, saying certain things, in the presence of a certain reality, then maybe I've committed a crime against my nafs. Then maybe that's why I can't avoid something that's haram. Because I set myself up for failure in that way. لا تقربوا, don't go near zina. How is going near it? The illicit looks, the illicit messages, the things that Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't want for me, that end up destroying me. Right? That's just an example.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna. So I think as we all grew up learning about the nafs, it's something like it's a red zone. It's something that we have to completely delete.
Delete the nafs?
So it's not. It sounds like it's not that. It's more about controlling it and replacing the bad for the good.
No,
because
yeah,
the nafs
please.
is what you are.
Yeah, no, the nafs could become a very beautiful thing, right? There's another. Since I gave you guys that line of poetry, I'll give you another one. The other one is again. I said nafs and ruh are synonymous according to so many usages, except in certain regards, right? So the other line of poetry is عليك بالروح فاستكمل فضائلها فإنك بالروح لا بالجسم إنسان. The line of poetry says, be keen on your soul and complete its virtues, because that's what makes you a human being, not your body. How many people are human beings in terms of their bodies, but when you come to deal with them on an emotional level or a relationship level, they're absolutely horrid. Their characters absolutely deplorable, right? So there are many people who might seem to be human beings, but they're heartless, emotionless, no sense of commitment, no sense of compassion. All of these things are very alarming. And that's, we don't want to delete the nafs. I don't want to fight against my nafs. No, I want to become in harmony with my nafs. If I try to use my nafs in a way that it wasn't meant to be used, then guess what? That's when the friction's going to come about. That's when, when I go against fitrah, that's when I start mutilating the nafs, right? You could liken that to, hey, what's something that, it's like someone who got a new car, right? New car, it's a nice brakes, suspension, مش عارف ايه. Oh, it's like Zayd's khutbah today. I didn't know that about Zayd. Did you hear the khutbah?
That he was a bad driver. Yeah.
I had no idea.
Still is.
If you didn't hear the khutbah, Ustad Zayd shared something very publicly about himself, that he wasn't a good driver when he was younger, which I'm sure many of us are also guilty of. But anyway, since he said it. So, you get a good car, right? You want to, test the brakes out, right? You speed really fast, or you do what a lot of guys do. They keep on pressing on the brakes too hard, and then they press the gas too hard, and then you press the brakes too hard, and then what goes wrong? Is it the suspension or something? The transmission, sorry, it's called the transmission. The transmission gets messed up, not the suspension. I'm not a mechanic, all right? So anyway, so you mess up the car. Why? Because you used it in a way it wasn't meant to be used. Same thing happens with the nafs. Wallahu a'lam.
That was beautiful.
Eh? The mechanic of the soul. Jazakallah khair, fikri.
That was beautiful. You should be up here, not me. Tafadhal. Barakallah feek. So we are at a halfway mark, so maybe now we can discuss more about how we control that, how we tame that. There's a lot of questions regarding that. We can go more in depth, but from a higher level, as we prepare for Ramadan, what are the things you can tell us about controlling the nafs, disciplining it, bringing in these new good habits that give us that harmony?
Look, I think I would say, it's not rocket science, right? It's really not rocket science. It really just takes the work. I need to be committed. I need to be committed to actually going down this path. I can't, just try and then give up. do it for a few days. No, do something consistent and stick with it. You can't be able to stick with it by yourself. Help yourself by finding someone who could help you do that, right? Get someone involved in your journey and in your pursuit. I need to commit to this path. It's not something that I'm going to find the fruits right away. If I'm talking about changing patterns of behavior, that's really, really hard to do. It's extremely hard to do that. It takes a level of honesty with myself. And you know what? It also takes a willingness to, hear out advice from my friends, from those close to me, those who I could trust, those who could be a real mirror for me. It takes a lot of adjustments. To become someone who has self-control, you need to lose your control a whole lot of times. We're not perfect beings. Look, we're going to make tons of mistakes. And you know what? That's okay. That's part of the process of becoming someone who has more control of the nafs. However, I need to be able to do that. I need to, الصبر بالتصبر, right? العلم بالتعلم. I need to exert myself. I just need to work through certain things to be able to develop certain behaviors. That's really what it comes to when it comes to taming the nafs, taming your desires. Don't expose yourself. That's what our salaf would do. Don't expose yourself to certain situations that would be very compromising. That's what our salaf teach us, Don't put yourself in the hot seat because you really don't know how you would react to certain situations. That's why even the Prophet ﷺ, he says, لا تتمنوا لقاء العدو ولكن إذا لقيتموهم فاثبتوا. Don't wish for trials upon yourself. There was a hadith, this is a crazy hadith, but look how this companion thought. He became so frail and weak and sick. And the Prophet ﷺ came to visit him. And he made dua for him. And he said to him, why do I see you in such a condition? Have you made some type of prayer or dua? So the man said, the only thing I've been saying is, Allahumma in kunta mu'adhibi bi shay'in fil akhirah fa'ajjilhu li fid dunya. He said he was making this dua. Oh Allah, if I'm going to get punished for something on the Day of Judgment, then punish me in this life for it, so that when the Day of Judgment comes, my record's clean. Does it make sense? His dua, does it make sense? Does it make sense? It doesn't make sense? I think it makes sense. And he doesn't want to get punished on the Day of Judgment. So his logic is, hey, you know what? If I have to deal with it right now, then at least better now than later. Because later it's going to be Jannah or not, no other place, right? But the Prophet ﷺ told him, Subhanallah, la tutiq. You'll never be able to deal with that. So what? The Prophet ﷺ told him to ask Allah for afiyah. Allahumma yasaluka al-afiyah. Oh Allah, I ask you for well-being. So don't put yourself in the hot seat. Don't put yourself in a difficult situation or a questionable circumstance from the get-go. Then it will be a whole lot easier to deal with the nafs. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna. So it's not just doing the right things, instead of putting yourself around the hima of Allah, close to the haram, putting yourself close to the halal, being around the goodness, being in a situation where you can just soak yourself in good habits, good people,
and again,
good words.
If you listen to Ustad Zaid's khutbah today, a lot of it relates to this. Hey, you know what? You're feeling a lot of desires and lust. Well, if you're listening to music all about sexual things for hours on end every day, I would be surprised if you don't always have that on your mind. How on earth are you not going to have it on your mind when you're listening to things that make you think of love and relationships and this and that? مش عارف. You did it yourself. Why are you listening to these types of things? Right? Or what you're looking at. If what you're looking at is so vile, things that are all about violence and brutality and murder, very dark things, like people like those types of, some people love those types of movies, non-stop, exposing themselves, like they go watch some movie about, like, I don't know, about the jinn or something like that, and then they don't know how to sleep at night. They start hearing everything that's, moving, and they start feeling like they're seeing things. Why? They're always watching things that terrorize their soul. Always watching things that, all about brutality, right? And then when you come to see how they react with it, you don't think that affects, like, if I'm constantly seeing people, hurting others, that's not going to affect how I deal with people? It absolutely is, of course. I might not realize it, but again, that violence is learned behavior. Same thing with other things. That's what I'm watching. What if I'm watching things that, again, everyone's a witness upon themselves. If I'm watching things that are very illicit, and sexually speaking, and then I start asking, hey, I really need to get married. I need to get married now. I can't control myself. I don't know what I'm going to do. I feel like I'm going to fall into haram. Well, there's a solution. What am I exposing my nafs to? Why am I exposing it to the fire if that's only going to cause me pain? Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek. One thing I really liked about what you said in the first week of the Ulum Quran class is that Ramadan is coming up, and Ramadan is Shahr al-Quran, and if you want to feel connected to the Quran, then learn about the Quran. And I was personally on the fence about joining the class, be it a Sunday night and all. But that pushed me over the edge. Well, let me just be around that. Let me just learn a little bit more. Let me just hear a few things, and maybe I'll absorb some percent of it. And then from there, I can, you can set yourself up, and we can set ourselves up for Ramadan and be in a better place. So barakallahu feek for that reflection. I wanted to share it.
Okay, your words gave me another reflection. Another thing I could add to the list. There's nothing that does away with darkness like what? There you go. Jazakallah khair. I'm Filali in the back. So there's nothing that does away with darkness like light. You know what? I want to do away with all those toxic effects of my nafs. Maybe I need the light of the Quran in my heart. Maybe that's what I need. Maybe I don't need, again, maybe I don't need to focus so much on removing all of those negative things from my life as much as I need to focus on introducing positive things to it. Because the Quran itself in my life will help me figure out a lot of things. You know what? If I start connecting with this book on a real spiritual level, my behavior is going to naturally change. It's easy to tell someone, hey, you know what? Someone who's hooked on drugs, hey, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad for you. You're going to ruin your life. And he's going to nod and say his head, yeah, I know, I'm trying, and, hopefully one day I'll stop doing drugs. Yeah, and then what? And then he's going to just go on with his behavior. It's another thing when it comes from a place of conviction, this is something I really want for myself. I want this. I love this book. This is amazing. I didn't know the Quran was this special. You know what? So maybe let me do away with the darkness by introducing light. That's your reflection, Ibrahim.
Well, I don't have another reflection to your reflection. But how do we then, we talk about tazkiyah. I think this is what we're kind of discussing here. We're talking a little bit about tazkiyah, purifying ourselves.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little bit about tazkiyah and then how we do a 1-2 punch into tarbiyah with that?
Tazkiyah and then a 1-2 punch with tarbiyah.
So tarbiyat al-nafs and tazkiyah. Or it's tahliyah, tazkiyah, and then tarbiyah, right?
So look, tazkiyah, again, purifying the soul. Like look, they have this wisdom. It says this, look, prevention is better than needing intervention. Right? To stop something from becoming toxic in the first place is a whole lot better than to remedy it after it's gone bad. And this is a very important wisdom. It teaches us a lot, right? To be able to protect my soul before the fact is a lot easier than after the fact. But even with that, the journey of tazkiyah is something that is, again, from beginning to end. It's not something you ever stop doing. There's no point in which you say, you know what? I have the cleanest soul out there. That's it, mission accomplished. I could go home now, right? No. The nafs is an interesting thing because it's always going to introduce something to you, right? You're going to see someone and it's going to put a thought in there. Hey, you know what? Who does that person think they are? I'm 10 times better than them, right? I've been doing things since X, Y, Z. I know this and they don't know that. I'm a real special person, right? And so on and so forth. That's the nafs, right? That causes, why did he look at me like that? He must be thinking X, Y, Z. That's an assumption. Arrogance. You got envy. You got vanity, ujub. You got conceit. You got so many different types of diseases of the heart, brothers and sisters. It never ends. You always need to be alert. Right? So, tazkiyat an-nafs is something that really puts me in an intimate relationship with my soul. You know, did you ever hear of the idea, hey, you know, sit down and talk to yourself? You guys ever thought of doing that? Anyone here of sit down and talk with yourself? Don't worry, you're not going to be crazy if you talk to yourself, right? People might think you're crazy, but again, you know, it's not a crazy thing to do. Talk to your nafs. We have so many examples from our Salaf when they would do this. They would have a conversation, reminding themselves of the moment and of what's to come. You know, and I've shared this story here before, but just to repeat it, like so, the one of the Salaf, you know, he dug a grave somewhere on his property. I don't know where, but he dug a grave on his property. And whenever he would feel like his heart would get hard, he would go sit in the grave. He would just go sit in the grave. And he'd start talking to himself. Again, he's not a crazy person, right? You would think a crazy person would do this, but in actuality, he's not a crazy person. And he would say to himself, what would you do now if you were in this lifeless, if you were in this grave right now, lifeless, unable to move? And he'd remind himself and he'd say, your moment isn't now. Get up and do something before you get to this place. Right? That's a way that I need to talk to my nafs. I need to talk to my nafs in this manner. Right? What good is anything I do right now if I ultimately end up in hellfire? That's a conversation I need to have with my nafs. You know what? Let me think right now of the present moment and of the opportunity I have while I'm living. I need to have these conversations. Right? So if I don't hold myself accountable, then there's no way I'll ever learn self-control. Right? That's what they say. You know, if I never hold myself accountable, then there's no way I'll ever learn self-control. What does that mean? Please don't, you know, go get something and start hitting yourself every time you do something. No, that's not what I mean by holding yourself accountable. You know, Allah doesn't want us to punish our souls. I shared this with the shabab and a halaqah recently, you know, that some people, when they become religious, they become a little bit, you know, zealous, you know. I need to become a zahid, right? Just like Abdullah ibn Mubarak was a zahid. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my mattress, I'm going to throw it outside, I'm going to go to my bed, I'm going to break the bed, I'm going to go to all those trophies and snap their heads off. And then the parents are going to come and say, please save my son. Something's gone wrong with him. He's snapping the heads off of all the trophies. Right? No, I'm not even joking. This has happened. These are real stories. So, you know, don't ask me who. Okay? Don't ask me who. Ask Amu Fikri who. So, but anyway, this is real stuff. Right? So that's not what we mean by holding yourself accountable. What we mean by holding yourself accountable is, you know what? There is muhasaba, and then there is muraqaba, there is also musharata, there is also muaqaba. There are manners of dealing with the nafs to put in its place. Right? If I'm someone who's never willing to second guess myself, should I have really dealt with this sister in this way? Why did I say these words? Why did I act this way? Was this really fair to do in that type of situation? If I'm not someone who's willing to have those types of conversations with my nafs, then guess what? The nafs is going to continue to reign and be in control. No, I need to have muhasabah every single night before I go to sleep. Every single night I need to go to sleep. Before I go to sleep, I need to say, am I justified to be angry with this person? Am I justified in the way I dealt with that person? Should I reconsider the way I'm looking at this situation? Trust me, it's very beneficial. Talk to your nafs. Talk to it. Say to it, oh nafs, you're not going to control me. I'm in control of you. And Allah is in control of me. Right? So that's muhasabah. There's muraqabah too. You know, muraqabah is a very, very important thing. Is to realize your position from Allah. And where you're at. Even when you're isolated and no one else is around. You know, the worst thing could happen is for someone to feel like they could do what they want just because other people aren't going to hold them accountable. That when they're alone, they're going to do atrocious things. When there's no one there to criticize or remark, they're going to say things, do things unimaginable. They would never act that way if another human being was around. That's a scary thing, right? That's the muraqabah, brothers and sisters. What thoughts am I allowing within my nafs? There's something to observe your actions, but it's another thing to observe your thoughts. How, and we gave a khutbah recently about that, positive thinking, right? What am I allowing inside in terms of my thoughts? That's all part of the process of controlling the nafs. I don't want to go too long, but if there is, those are some, and then musharata is, and mu'aqaba is, musharata is, if you do this, I'm not going to let you do that. Really? You're going to treat your nafs just like a baby, right? I'm going to do this to myself. All right, you know what? If I fall into this act or this behavior, I'm going to fast a day. That's how I'm going to hold myself to consequences. I'm going to fast a day. If I say a curse word, I'm going to pay $100 every time I say one. Right? I'm going to go broke. For some people, they'll go broke pretty quickly if they put that as the standard. But anyway, the point is you put something as your standard. I am not going to allow my nafs to make me fall into wrongdoing without it facing some type of consequence. Yeah.
Barakallah feek. And then can we touch on tarbiyah? How does one do tarbiyah, of the nafs and controlling, these desires? Is there 3 or 4 practical steps that we can take?
Looks like what's his name wants to say something though. Yusuf. Tfadlan. Sorry, I was reading a message. It said, can the Shaykh tell the woman to shh? I did it. Tfadlan. Yeah, look. Again, look, the nafs is a tricky thing. We need to be very careful with our emotional states. Just remember this. Look, the past, I have no relationship with the past except seeking forgiveness for any shortcomings or returning the rights of those who I taken their rights. That's the only relationship I have with the past. We can't change the past. I can't change anything that was happened in the past. I can only try to make it right in my present. That's the only thing I could do. By repenting, so look, the shaitan comes to the person, and I said this many times before. He makes the person think of their past so they fall into despair. He makes the person think of their future so they fall into false hopes. If the person manages to think of the present moment, he makes the person think of everything that's irrelevant to them just so they don't change or they don't do something positive with the present moment. That's what the shaitan does. Right? So I'll tell that person, hey, please, brother, sister, you could continue regretting what you did in the past to the end of your days. But it'll never change the past. But what you could do is make the present right. Make the present right. Don't hold on to the past. Don't hold on to it. If you did something wrong, make it right to the person. You know what? Even if someone did something wrong to you, don't hold on to their past. If they make it right and they ask you for forgiveness, forgive them. Overlook it. Right? Don't cling on to it. So I would say, that's what I would say about the past. Wallahu a'lam. Does anyone else want to ask something direct before we continue with those questions? Ask or comments or questions? Any comments or questions? Go ahead. How can you cleanse your nafs? It's a beautiful question. Jazakallah khair. Look, there's a 3-step process. I think we mentioned it recently in one of the Friday forums. The first thing to cleansing the nafs is ridding it of toxins, right? The first thing is ridding it of its toxins. I was going to say something, but forget it. So ridding it of its toxins. There are certain things that are going to bring you down, right? The first thing for me to be able to experience the beauty of something is by removing those elements from the way. We call this takhalli. So if I'm doing major sins, I need to stop those major sins. I need to stop them now, or else I'm never going to feel the sweetness of prayers. I can't feel the sweetness of Ramadan if I'm doing iftar It's like imagine someone fasting during the day. Right when Ramadan comes, they pull out their marijuana, ala tul, right? So is that going to work? What a beautiful Ramadan experience, right? It's definitely going to be high, but not on spiritual high. you know, so that we don't want that type of Ramadan experience or that type of spiritual experience. No, stop the sin, enjoy the worship. That's the way it works. Wallahu alam. How can I continue to the more again that journey to experiencing more and more with spirituality doesn't end. Doesn't end. But it takes some certain efforts to get the ball rolling in that way. But that's where it starts. Removing the toxins. Wallahu alam. Any other comments or questions before we go on with the thing? Any comments, questions? Tafadhal.
So back to the question of tarbiyah. So now how do we implement tarbiyah in our lives?
Look, tarbiyah is something, it comes from Ar-Rabb, right? Ar-Rabb is the one who tends to the needs of everything stage after stage until it comes to fruition, right? رَبَّ الشَّيْءَ يَرُبُّهُ إِذَا أَصْلَحَهُ, right? It comes from إصلاح الشيء, to better something, to rectify it. Tarbiyah, in other words, is something that is in stages, is something that is cultivated over a span of time. It is something in which, certain meanings are ingrained within you. That journey of tarbiyah is a lifelong journey, and it's not an individual journey. So for me, tarbiyah is something that actually involves a community of believers. And that's why usually we do the part of the tarbiyah plan would be through halaqat, again through classes, through interaction, through relationship building, through friendships. That's part of the process of tarbiyah. Again, even the way you operate in terms of your family, in terms of your business, all of that is part of the process of tarbiyah. You know what? The person's never going to learn patience, never going to learn sacrifice until they have certain things and they're in a position where they have to make certain decisions. Patience, all right, I'm really angry and I'm very angry with this person. What am I going to do? Right? I have a lot of money and I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. What am I going to do? Right? That's where tarbiyah comes into place. Wallahu alam. So tarbiyah comes with dealing with the situations of life. Each one of them is supposed to teach me something new. But wallahu alam, those are just some general pointers about it.
Barakallah feek, Shaykhna. So another question, how do I overcome a sin that the nafs is addicted to? And will my good deeds turn to dust because of that sin on the Day of Judgment?
How do I overcome a sin that my nafs is addicted to? Right? And will my good deeds turn to dust on the Day of Judgment if I continue to do it? Look, it's a scary thing, but when you use the word addicted, you're telling me that you're doing something that has become a toxic habit in your life. And undoing a toxic habit is extremely difficult. One of the things that goes into it is figuring out why you're doing it. Why am I doing it? Okay, I know that I shouldn't be doing this, right? I realize that this is destructive. I don't want to do it anymore, right? That's not enough. That's just step one, realization. Step two is, well, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Is it a coping mechanism? Is it because I'm finding certain pleasures in it? Is it because someone or some people around me are continuing to influence it? Is it coming as a response to stressful circumstances in your life? Maybe we need to figure out those first. So why am I doing it? Figure out the stressors. It'll help provide a solution. All right. Sometimes you can't figure these things out by just discussing it with yourself in your head. You need to sit down with someone who can give you impartial feedback, and then help you put a plan together. Addictions are not easy to deal with, right? So, but those are the first steps to dealing with it. Wallahu alam. And then there needs to be certain follow-ups after that to see, because I might stop this behavior for a certain period of time, but then I'll relapse, right? So I need the follow-ups, right? Wallahu alam.
Sounds like.
And will they turn to dispersed dust on the Day of Judgment? I didn't do that on purpose.
No, it's okay.
Will they turn to disperse dust on the Day of Judgment? I hope not. You know the people on the Day of Judgment who their deeds will turn to disperse dust, those people were not sincere, were not genuine in their amal. They were not. And they are people, the Prophet ﷺ describes them to us. They're not committed. They're not doing it from a place of belief, right? They're just doing it in a very whimsical way. If this suits me, I'll do it. If it doesn't, I won't, right? That's a very scary way to think. The Prophet ﷺ describes them in the hadith that they are people that when they're alone with the boundaries of Allah, they breach those boundaries because there's no one to stop them, no one to criticize them, no one to hold them accountable. So those are the people who their deeds turn to disperse dust. I hope that our deeds won't, but we just need to be sincere, genuine, really try to figure them out. Wallahu alam.
Barakallah feek, Shaykhna. This question, it comes in two parts, or two separate people asked it. So there's two levels. The first level, sometimes I do things, I don't want to do the things like praying and other deeds. What can I do to remedy that? So I don't feel it, I don't feel like doing it.
I don't feel it and I don't feel like doing it, wanting to do it. The prayers and the other things. Part of what helps is, again, when we say investment, some of you guys who actually do investments, financial investments, what do you do before you do an investment? I hope you do something. I hope you just don't throw your money there and say hopefully it becomes gold. You do something. You do some research, right? Some market research, and you start asking people. You might ask like 10, 20 people for advice. Should I get into this? Should I not? I'm thinking about taking this on. Is it a risk? مش عارف إيه. You really strategize, and you probably sleep over it to the point where you start dreaming about it. That's when you're really committed to something, by the way. When you start dreaming about it, that means it's dominated your thoughts, right? But anyway, how can, what was the question again? I lost my train of thought.
You tell me.
Huh?
No, I'm just kidding. What if I'm not feeling things like praying?
All right, what if I don't feel like praying? What if I don't feel like praying? So what do I do now? I need to understand why prayer is the way it is. I need to invest in it. I need to study it. I need to actually make some effort into, what are the meanings behind prayer? Why do I make sujood? What's the meaning behind the ruku'? What's the meaning behind sujood? I need to make an investment. All right, how can I optimize the experience in my prayer? Maybe very likely the reason why you're not benefiting from your prayers is because it's doing little to advance you in your life. Is this quick thing you do, 2-3 minutes on the go, right before the prayer time enters, just because you want to get done with it. It's not really central. It's not as central. Why do you think we have so many different types of prayers? We have so many different types of prayers that are sunnah, by the way. There is something called istikhara, when you want Allah to help you choose something. There's something called salat al-hajjah, when you're in need of some type of divine assistance to achieve something that's mashru' and acceptable. There are the prayers that you do in the different situations in travel, going and coming. And I think there's even a sunnah that you do when you want to repent, sunnah salat al-tawbah. There's a 2 rak'ahs that are recommended for you to pray when you want to do tawbah. There's salat al-duha, there's qiyamul layl, there is witr prayers, and then there's even that sunnah. I taught the guys, we have a fiqh class for the guys, I told them about sunnat al-qatl. They even mention in the books of fiqh, if you're about to be executed, inshallah you guys will never have to do this, I hope not. But if you're about to be executed, they say that it's recommended for you to ask the person who's going to kill you, let me pray 2 rak'ahs first, right? No, the reason why we get this is because one of the Sahaba, he did it. One of the Sahaba, before he was executed, he prayed 2 rak'ahs. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned it in the hadith, so that's why we call it sunnat al-qatl. So anyway, but the point is, it's an investment. Prayers is one of those interesting things that as long as you're conscious, even if you're on your deathbed and you can only pray with your eyes, you still do it, right? Have I made the investment? Maybe that's why I feel like that. Some people, they could just go hours on end, studying, especially with those, with cryptocurrencies, some people completely suck their brains out. They're always looking at that, especially if they do day trading and stuff. Okay, is it going up? Is it going down? All right, should I buy? Should I sell? Should I get this currency? Should I go that? And it's really, really stressful because it's a very volatile market, right? So their mind and soul is completely there. Is it there for salah? Is it there for, if it's not there, then maybe that's why I feel like that. Maybe that's why I feel like that, because my mind and soul aren't really there, right? There's a hadith that says about that shaitan, right? That shaitan that comes to people during their prayer. There's a shaitan, it's a hadith in Sahih Muslim. The whole purpose of this shaitan is to distract people in their prayers. His name is, anyone knows his name? What's his name? Khunzub, right? What an awful name. Right? Khunzub has his way with a lot of people, right? Some people, there was a joke, they said this, it's a joke. They said, there was one of the Salaf, he said, if I forget something and I want to remember it, I go to Salah and pray 2 rak'ahs because I know Khunzub's going to come remind me, right? It's a joke, but it's real. It's real. The shaitan will make you remember things like that are just like so not on the radar. Like during your salah, and you'll just forget where you're at, especially if you're following someone else in salah. Maybe that's why it's happening, right? That's my advice. Trust me, brothers and sisters. If you invest in salah and siyam and you give it your all, you're going to find a different effect than that. That is very typical of someone who is doing salah and siyam on the go. Yalla khalas, let's move on with our lives, right?
Barakallahu feek. A level deeper, and the time is coming short, so maybe just a few mulahadat on this one. Now, what if your nafs hates a certain ibadah, but you do it for Allah? Does that take the reward away?
If your nafs hates a certain ibadah, but you do it for Allah, does that take your reward away?
Yes.
Why would it take your reward? No, inshallah, you get more rewarded. Look, there's a beautiful standard you have. I know this. Like, let's take example as siyam. Some people, again, look, there's something called the sabru an ma'siyatillah, patience in avoiding sin, and there's something else called the sabru ala ta'atillah, being patient in worship and devotion. It's not an easy thing, right? Allah can make it easy, right? وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. It is a big matter except for those people who are humbly submissive to Allah. But again, when it comes to fasting, for example, some people, all right, I get these migraines that are so debilitating, and I can't function. I feel like I'm paralyzed. My body starts feeling weak. I start getting sick. Some people, that's their experience with fasting. Their experience with fasting is it takes a huge toll on them. They can't sleep. They can't sleep. They can't function, and they're doing it for Allah, right? So there's a beautiful hadith on the Prophet ﷺ, he tells Aisha this, radiyallahu anha. He says to her, إِنَّمَا أَجْرُكِ عَلَى قَدْرِ نَصَبِكِ. Prophet ﷺ tells us, Sayyidah Aisha, the reward that you will get for anything you do is commensurate to your struggle. So people who struggle doing good things will actually, like right now, I would say, I would hope, no one here has the urge to drink alcohol. I hope so. But someone who has the urge to drink alcohol and is just like this massive struggle, that they're just like so tempted, they'll get special reward for that, because that's not one of our trials. Perhaps it's not one of my trials that I just like. Okay, I'm so urged to buy this pack of beer or whatever it is. For some people, it's this absolute jihad. It's an extreme urge and they can't control it. Or they control it with difficulty. They'll get maximum reward for this. Reading the Quran. Some people, they grew up reading the Quran. So easy. 1, 2, 3. Very fluently, mashallah, since they're young kids. Right? Other people, they spend 10 minutes just to finish one ayah. And it's a struggle. And they don't enjoy it, right? They might not enjoy it. The Prophet ﷺ tells us in the hadith, الَّذِي يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنِ وَيَتَتَعْتَعُ فِيهِ فَلَهُ أَجْرًا. He will have double reward. So your struggle will not diminish your reward. Why are you feeling like this? You want to do it just for Allah? Likely because it's really hard. It's really hard on you. And if you feel that, don't despair, because you're not going to get less reward for feeling that. Inshallah, you'll get more, because you're actually doing it even though your nafs doesn't want to. Allah.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna. A quick question before I dig into maybe a bigger question. What is the difference between nafs and qareen? Are there any connections there?
Qareen and nafs?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course there's a difference. Qareen is that jinn that's right alongside you, telling you to do good things or bad things. That's your qareen. Qareen is your associate from the jinn. You guys know that, right? There's an ayat in Surah Al-Zukhruf. What do they say? The ayat say, حتى إذا جاءنا قال يا ليت بيني وبينك بعد المشرقين فبئس القرين. Right? So وَلَنْ يَنْفَعَكُمْ الْيَوْمَ إِذْ ظَلَمْتُمْ أَنَّكُمْ فِي الْعَذَابِ مُشْتَرِكُونَ. Right? So the ayat of the Quran tell us that each person has along with them a jinn. Right? And this is not to terrify you. Right? It's not to terrify you guys. You have a jinn. This jinn is either telling you to do good things or telling you to do bad things. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah helped me in making him Muslim. Right? So this is about the qareen. So the nafs is completely different than the qareen.
So is there a connection between the two?
Is there a connection between the two?
Or maybe, well, I guess the answer might just be that the qareen will feed off of a weaker nafs or a nafs that is ammara bisu, right?
The qareen's going to be there to try to influence you, doing this or that. Yeah.
Barakallah feek.
Yeah.
We are coming up to a close. I'll ask one more question here because it's been up top for a while, and then maybe we'll gauge the audience. Not much clarity on this question. What would happen if you have nafsani, feministic views on life?
What would happen if you have nafsani, feministic views on life? What do they mean by that?
I'm not sure. I'm guessing maybe we could answer the question a little bit more generally in terms of if we have nafsani views on life. I think maybe they mean more of the nafs ammara bisu, perhaps, because the nafs we discussed could be good and bad. So
yes. What does that have to do with feminists?
I don't know. You tell me.
The one who asked the question, are you willing to give more detail so you give an answer? Nafsani, feministic views, right? Look, it's coming from over there. I think it's coming from over here, Amu Fikri. Most likely it's coming from over here, right? Look, there is toxic feministic views, and there's also toxic masculinity. What is it? Masculinity. Toxic masculinity and toxic feminist views as well. It happens on both sides, right? Is there both dynamics? Yeah, Ustaz Zaid mentioned in the khutbah today. I liked how he, gave that fair assessment. So look, the nafs, if I let it run wild, it could ruin everything for me. I'm serious. Brothers and sisters, I need to pay attention to this. There are many marriages there that are victims of the nafs, right? The guy with his toxic masculinity comes and wants to dominate. I'm in charge. I'm the boss. Everything runs through me. Or the sister with toxic feminist views comes and starts assuming the heck out of everything and misconstruing it and, bringing so much toxic baggage to the table because someone's whispering in her ear this and someone's whispering in her ear that. It happens on both sides, again. Or someone's whispering in the guy's ears too. There's sometimes there's guys who whisper in each other's ears too, right? He's doing this in his marriage. I'm going to tell my friend, hey, you shouldn't let her do that either. Oh, you should do like this. Unfortunately, it happens. It all is a victim of the nafs. You know what? The nafs causes people to not want to apologize. The nafs causes people to never reconsider their ways. You know what? I need to reassess. Maybe I was wrong in the way I dealt with this. And I'm going to come to this person and say, you know what, I'm sorry. I should have dealt with this differently. I'm going to be honest, right? So the nafs causes people to have tunnel vision with their shahwa and desires. The nafs causes people to transgress, right? So again, it's at the core. Jazakallah khair for the question. Toxic, feministic views. I don't know if you were trying to throw a jab there, but the opposite jab back is toxic masculinity, right? So, wallahu alam.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna. Are there any questions from the audience before we close?
Any question? You have another one? All right, تفضل. Oh, Amu Filali, you had something too? تفضل. right. How to avoid falling into the nafsi mentality, and what are practical steps you could take? Look, practical steps you could take is, hey, you know what? I came to the masjid. I found people in the same boat as me. Let me try to stick with it. I don't want to be alone and isolated again. I wish that these faces would be in the masjid every single night for salah. I want to be around the masjid. Let me be around good people. Maybe that'll help resolve a lot of problems I'm dealing with. Just being around good people, right? Like we said earlier, introduce a candle to the darkness, and you know what? It's going to make the darkness dissipate and decrease, right? Let me start doing that. That's one step I could take. Let me commit to certain positive things in my week. A class, a program, attendance to the masjid at a certain frequency, and then you know what? Let me find certain good companions around me that'll help be good mirrors for myself. Let me stop doing sin. Let me try it out. Hey, you know what? Is life easier doing sin or avoiding sin? Is life easier, right? Some people, again, because it's all about perception, right? I really want this. It looks fun. I want to experience this. I'm attracted to it, right? Let me do it. Trust me, it'll cause you so much more pain and struggle than trying not to do it would cause you, right? So try avoiding sin. Let me try it. Let me try it out. Wallahu alam, those are just and then go back to the other things. Muhasabah. Every single night, I'm going to, half an hour before I go to sleep, I'm going to sit on my bed and review what happened in my day. Should I have said that? Should I have gone here? Should I have reacted like that? Should I be viewing this person in this light? Let me start having those conversations every night, right? And you know what? If I have the willingness to write it down somewhere, I know the guys aren't going to do this because you probably don't believe in diaries, but sisters, hey, do it. Guys, do it, right? Write it as notes on your phones, right? So write it down. Maybe with time, I'll start learning a little bit more about my nafs, right? I need to have a lot of conversations. Let me do those things, let me go to the grave, right? Not to sit in it, and inshallah, you guys live a long life before you ever have to go to your graves for your final visit. But let me go outside of janazah times, and let me just go see the serenity. It will destroy, the Prophet said it's the destroyer of pleasures, right? Hadim al-ladhat. Let me go to it, and maybe it'll help me gain perspective on life. Wallahu alam. That's one thing. Anyone else have a comment or question? Anyone else? I see one over there. Tfaddal. And then we'll go to the Hajj. No, go ahead. Okay. Not literally, like if you go to the doctor and they check on your insides, they're not going to be black, yeah. Spiritually. Of course. So it makes you feel much lighter. And I said this recently because Rajab came in. Hey, we all feel it when Ramadan comes around. Even with the headaches and the caffeine withdrawals, in Ramadan you feel so much more energetic. Many people feel this. Why? Because the burdens of sin are lifted off your shoulders. You're doing less sins in Ramadan. So absolutely. Wallahu alam. Tfaddal Hajj.
Do you think nursing versus not nursing has to do something of shaping the nafs or not?
What is it? Nursing?
Breastfeeding.
Breastfeeding?
Breastfeeding or formula.
Does it affect the nafs of the child? Is that what you're asking? You're asking that? Yes. So look, there are definitely certain emotional and spiritual connections that are established through the process of breastfeeding between the mother and the child. That's undeniable. Of course, we can't say that there's not going to be any connection. Again, sometimes some mothers are tested that their children don't accept their milk, or some mothers are tested that they can't produce milk. So that's why, the presence of some alternative is actually a big blessing. We have to have this in mind, that not everyone has the blessing of breastfeeding their children. But in actuality, if it's possible, and obviously it's not easy, it's a big struggle for sisters. That's why there's something in Sharia that accommodates it, right? Sharia tells them, hey, you could put your fasting on hold just so you could breastfeed your child. Think, is that powerful or not? It is. It shows you how important it is. Something that if you were to abandon it in any other situation, it's considered one of the biggest kaba'ir. Not fasting Ramadan, it's one of the biggest kaba'ir. Even people who don't pray, even people who are so far fast during Ramadan, right? But Sharia says, hey, because for many women or most women, if they were to fast while breastfeeding, it's going to cause their milk supply to dry up. It's going to be very difficult. So Sharia says, hey, you know what? This emotional connection, if possible, is very important. So yeah, there's a connection there, and then there's other spiritual inclinations with it, like is salah al or salah al-ab, is the piety of the parents somehow transferred to their children in some manners? Very possibly, right? The Quran says, وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. But it's not a standard rule, because it'll be inconsistent sometimes. Sometimes that piety transfers, right? Because again, if the child's in a home, just think about it, even emotionally and psychologically. If the child's in a home where there's a lot of dhikr, a lot of calmness, peace, tranquility, the mother and father are together, they're doing positive things, you think that's going to be like the same when the child's experiencing all kinds of tension? The child feeds off of the energy from the parents, where there's a lot of anger and rage and stress and anxiety. Even stress and anxiety affect the child. If the woman has too much stress and anxiety during her pregnancy, it affects the child. If the woman is doing drugs or something like that, it's not going to affect the child? It will, right? Again, because the child feeds off of that. It affects the child in many different ways. So of course it's going to affect, and that's salah al-ab and salah al-um are going to affect in whichever ways they're going to affect. Wallahu alam. Any other comments or questions? I'm done. Okay, Jazakumullah khair, subhanakallah, bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Again, next week we're going to call it a meeting point instead of a Friday forum. Still same time, same place. The only difference is it's a meeting point. It's because it's with me and Shaykh Yasser and Ustad Zaid. We're going to have it here at the normal time, 8 o'clock. It's going to be about marriage. And also, please feel free to join us for the other programs that we have in the masjid. Jazakumullah khair. As always, Ustaz Ibrahim for everything. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.